Okay, this is take two of my new little series that's like maybe going to be a weekly news series here on Critical Weight Theory, and it's called Dimwits, Dip, Shots, Dufuses, and Dullards. And I'm censoring it because YouTube doesn't want you to say swear words within the first 2 minutes of a given upload. So what can I do about that, I have to self-censor for those first 2 minutes. But anyway, this is a show within a show on the Critical Weight Theory podcast. And we're going to be looking at a quadruple D of the week. And, that's basically the worst person of the week. I also have a peripheral poop head of the week, who's somebody who's under the radar but who deserves attention. It's probably usually going to be somebody who's linked to the quadruple D. And the other segment is I'm going to be looking at a fetid fever dream flashback of the week. So, that's also probably going to be someone who's tangentially tied in with the other two categories. So, yeah. Who is the quadruple D of the week? Well, it is Matt Gaetz. So, if I had music here for this podcast, I would have some upbeat, maybe satirical theme fading in right now, but I don't have music, so you're just gonna have to imagine that. So, I already got the welcome out of the way, and we're gonna look at the absurd, scandalous, and downright baffling antics of our so-called leaders and public figures. I'm your host, Wade. I don't know if I properly introduced myself yet, but there it is. And I'm here to guide you through the maze of corruption, incompetence, and hubris. So today's quadruple D of the week is none other than former Congressman and Florida's favorite scandal machine, Matt Gaetz. Well, of course, he's not really the only Florida scandal machine, just like, you know, Florida probably doesn't only have one orange juice company, but there's a chance that he's one of the most uh, scandal plagued figures from Florida who's actually going to possibly flounder, you know. So what happened to Matt Gaetz, Let's look at that. Let's start with the big news. The House Ethics Committee has finally voted to release its investigative report on Matt Gaetz, reversing an earlier cowardly decision to keep the findings under wraps. It's a fine decision they made, so I probably shouldn't really insult it. But for those of you who've been out of the loop or living blissfully free of political drama, here's a quick recap. Matt Gaetz resigned from Congress last month in November 2024 after being nominated for the position of U.S. Attorney General by President elect Donald Trump, because he's a man of great taste, of course. Nothing but the best and brightest. So Gaetz eventually withdrew his nomination, citing mounting scrutiny. Uh-oh. You don't want any of that scrutiny if you're going to be a public figure. You're only, a public figure, literally in a position where you should be inviting scrutiny. Um, and, you're a taxpayer funded public figure on top of that. So you would think there would be pressure to look like you invite scrutiny, but I guess in this case, the public is just turning on that scrutiny too high, that scrutiny level, and they're putting them under the microscope, and not everybody likes that. The translation for the mounting scrutiny really is the heat was too much even for him. Florida's a humid place, but I guess at a certain point, you just gotta get out of that oven, or like if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. Well, he was feeling like he was right in the oven itself. So, what's in this report? Oh, just a laundry list of plausible allegations, including Boom, sexual misconduct with a minor. Boom, illicit drug use. Boom, sharing inappropriate images on the House floor. Boom, misusing state identification records. Boom, misappropriating campaign funds. Boom, and of course, accepting improper gifts or bribes. Boom again. I was a little late with that boom. Um, but like these are just common run of the mill scandals, I guess, for American politicians, even though they want to make it seem like, oh, I'm above accepting gifts or bribes. I'm above misappropriating funds. I'm above, you know, sharing dirty images on the house floor, I guess, which is something you wouldn't think somebody would even do, like, but I guess if you got the pornographic images or whatever he was showing, I guess he wanted to impress people that much that he was like, I'm going to do it as a politician at the workplace. I'm just going to presumably show off these images, and of course, there's the sexual misconduct stuff. It's definitely not as easy to make light of that, um, especially when he's a public figure again, paid with taxpayer dollars and all that kind of stuff. So you know, another angle of this is, of course, there's hypocrisy involved. The Republican Party wants to portray itself as so morally superior. We wouldn't be doing any of this kind of stuff. But what do you know? You lift up lift up the veneer, and what do you have? You have this kind of stuff that gets revealed time and time again. So this investigation has been dragging on since 2021, but now with the Department of Justice wrapping up its parallel inquiry without charges, because Merrick Garland is like that, you know, little weakling, pipsqueak Merrick Garland. And I hate to pick on the guy because he does look like a nerdy type of person. You would want him to be like strong, but he is like the stereotype. Like he's that nerdy figure on the beach that like somehow had a girlfriend, but then some muscle man kicked sand in his face and took his girl away. Well, in his case, maybe the sand didn't even need to get kicked in his face. Maybe like swatted the sand into his own face and was like, "Here, you go ahead and take my girl," or whatever. On so many different issues. But he's just a wuss. He's a wimp. And the ethics committee decided it was time to spill the tea. So they actually took the initiative where Merrick Garland failed. And spill the tea they will, right before the holiday recess, no less. So there was a resignation and a media pivot, of course. Now, you might think these allegations would send anyone scurrying into obscurity, but not Matt Gaetz. He's making a pivot straight into media. I guess he wanted to avoid the negative attention to go into a media based environment where people switch off their brains and they will not criticize him. So Gaetz announced plans to host a show on One American News Network, the far right outlet known for conspiracy theories and frothing at the mouth commentary. Because if there's one thing we've learned, it's that being disgraced in politics is just the first step to securing a lucrative media gig. So, from my perspective, yes, we're getting philosophical here, but this whole saga is a glaring example of the dangers of centralized power. When you concentrate influence in the hands of individuals like Gaetz, you're practically begging for corruption and abuse. And when institutions meant to hold these people accountable drag their feet for years, it's clear the system isn't broken. It's working exactly as intended. That's become clearer and clearer as time has marched on. So I've, I'm glad to put Gaetz aside for just a moment and talk about the peripheral poop head of the week. who is none other than Kevin McCarthy. So, our peripheral poop head of the week is a former Speaker of the House named Kevin McCarthy. I like to call him Squeaker of the Mouse because you know what? It's just so fun, you know? Anyway, McCarthy's political career is a masterclass in spineless ambition. He's been everywhere: California politics, House Majority Leader, Speaker of the House, and through it all, he's shown an almost supernatural ability to shift alliances. One minute he's criticizing Trump after January 6th, then the next he's groveling for his favor. And, I guess that's just the nature of his job. You got to leave your spine outside the door when you enter that building. And let's not forget his chaotic tenure as Speaker, which ended in his historic ousting in October 2023. McCarthy's career highlights the inefficiencies of hierarchical governments, especially when these hierarchies are propped up by volatile factions and functions. So I said it wrong. I said functions, but you know what? Functions works as well. They're volatile factions with volatile functions. And wow, we're approaching the fourth segment of the episode. And this is the Fetid Fever Dream flashback. And we're going to look at Eric Cantor. Going to be candid about Cantor, the cantankerous Cantor. So this week's Fetid Fever Dream flashback takes us back to 2014. How many people even remember that? Seems like we get a lot of collective amnesia these days. But anyway, this was when Eric Cantor, a rising Republican star whose House Majority Leader. Oh, he was a House Majority Leader. Whoops, I misworded myself. But anyway, he was unceremoniously booted from office by a Tea Party challenger. And doesn't a Tea Party sound nice? Like you could, I like a good tea every once in a while, but that's not really what happened here. Cantor's loss was billed as a grassroots victory, but let's be real, it was less about dismantling elitism and more about replacing one cog in the machine with another. Cantor's ties to Wall Street and corporate donors made him a symbol of out of touch establishment politics, but his defeat didn't exactly usher in a new era of progress. Instead, it became yet another example of how electoral politics shuffles the deck without ever questioning the system itself. So, from my perspective, this is just rearranging the chairs on the Titanic. And people like that movie. Maybe we should revisit it on a grander scale and turn this whole country into the Titanic. And you know, it's a I've never watched that movie, but I've heard I've heard things about it both good and bad, and I guess you could say that about reality itself. So, what's the bigger picture here? What is to be gained from all of this in terms of knowledge? Let's zoom out for a moment. What do Gaetz, McCarthy, and Cantor have in common? They're all products of a system that prioritizes power over accountability, spectacle over substance. Take Gaetz's pivot to One American News. It's a stark reminder of how media platforms, particularly those fueled by corporate interests, can rehabilitate disgraced figures. This isn't just about Gaetz, it's about the symbiotic relationship between political elites and media conglomerates and the greater interests that they serve. And McCarthy's tenure as Speaker underscores the same point. Centralized power invites corruption and dysfunction. And Cantor's downfall? It's proof that even grassroots energy can be co opted and redirected into maintaining the status quo, which is pretty much what it has done. Well, it's actually made the status quo worse over time. So, what's the alternative? Well, I keep on coming back to this, even though I try to be a conformist sometimes, but reality kind of shifts me in the other direction. I think the alternative is decentralized, community driven systems of governance and media. So let's dismantle the hierarchies that enable people like Gaetz and McCarthy to wield unchecked power. Let's create spaces where accountability isn't optional and where the voices of ordinary people aren't drowned out by the roar of corporate cash. So, yeah, that about does it for this week's episode of Dimwits, Dipshits, Doofuses, and Dullards. Thanks for joining me. As I looked at the absurdities of our political and media landscape, if you enjoyed this episode, or even if it just made you a little angry, be sure to subscribe if you're on YouTube, leave a review if you want, and share it with a friend or an enemy, somebody that you hate, or a frenemy. I suppose people can be somewhere in between. So until next time, remember the system isn't broken, it's rigged. And we're here to call it out one dimwit at a time. And here is where the outro music would fade out if I had music. But, we don't need that here. The news and the views are music to our ears enough. So have a good one, and I'll try to be back here next week, maybe with a co host. We'll see. Maybe we'll even have two co hosts. All right, so bye bye.